G'day everyone, we're here with Tom Kendall here at Kendall Permaculture Farm, and he's been kind enough to have a bit of a chat with us and going to show us around. So let's go and have a look and see what we can find.
No problem, we can do that.
Beautiful.
So this is the main kitchen garden.
Yeah.
And it's looking pretty good. I seriously haven't done hardly anything in here for probably nearly 2 years. I've done a little bit,
Yeah.
but it's the volunteers and Fabio and Zaia that have been looking after this mainly.
Yeah.
So I do more of the systems management and the systems implementation and ahead. And I obviously spent a lot of time here initially, but now it's been handed over to the volunteers and whatever. And with our volunteers, they feed themselves from the garden, and so they maintain it, and they actually pay it forward. Yeah. So that if they maintain it and they leave, the next person, because they got food because the previous people set it up for them. Yeah, so it's a continual rolling thing.
That's right.
And at the moment, Fabio's been the main driver of the garden, and you can see it's looking pretty good. So we set up the permaculture function, water harvesting management. Yeah, so there's a swale there, water coming out of the house, another swale up from the bathroom. So you set up the swales and then you start gardening in between, and then let it evolve. Don't force it, let it evolve. So that's just the basic function, and it's turned into a sort of, I've been told, sort of like a tropical garden. That's the beauty of the permaculture design. It just happens. You just do some of the basics. Garden paths on contour. Yeah. You know, the swales created that. The swales actually created the shape of the garden, and then all paths lead to home. Yeah. And it's actually comes together really well. So you just stay with the basic principles. Yeah. North facing, so I get my winter sun. That's why I did purchase this property, because I had that winter sun. So luckily I had that knowledge. I hadn't done PDC at that stage, but I had that knowledge to harvest your winter sun. And yes, you're working good. And then it's also getting the waste nutrients from the house coming down, and feeding the fertility system. And there's been an evolution even in the management of it. I get quite involved in the initial design and implementation, and then get busy doing other things by default. But then others just come in, and I monitor and overmanage. Make sure things stay in certain ways, because people don't have that awareness because they're still learning, and that's why they come here to learn. And then they just see that it just starts to happen because of those basics. We'll quickly duck down the food forest section. Zaia's busy harvesting strawberries. So we come through garden 1, 2 and 3, nominated by the swales. The swales divide them, and they're all waste streams coming out of the house, apart from this one here, which is actually a repeat of the pattern created, because it's all about pattern. And then we're coming into garden 4, and this vetiver grass is actually stopping the nut grass getting into the 1, 2 and 3. I don't want nut grass in there, so I've eradicated that, but this has got a lot of nut grass in here, but this can function with the nut grass.
Yeah.
This is garden 4, and this is our staple carbs section. So we're going ahead a fair bit with the cocoa yam. We're having pretty good productivity with that compared to the taro.
Yes.
The cocoa yam, we like that, and you can squirrel from that, so you don't have to pull the whole plant up. You just dig in once they're going. These are obviously only new ones, a bit further, a bit more productive, but that's getting more. And this is yam. So my yam section. This is actually the second year that's been here. We never had enough people here to harvest it last year, and we still have leftover yam flour. We had one grown a couple of years ago there. It was 21 kilo of tuber. So it's very productive. This space here, 2 years ago, so what's that, I don't know, 15 square metres or whatever it might be, we got 150 kilos of flesh out of that space. Yeah. So what we do is we harvest it all at once, or in a couple of weeks when all the vines died off, and then we dehydrate it, and then you keep the flour. And yam flour is great. It's a nice little product, and you don't need eggs with it. So if you're vegan, the vegans eat all our yam flour when they come through, because you don't need because it's slimy and sticks itself together, and so you don't need to put eggs with it to
make it.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So yeah, and what I'm doing here is actually I'm learning how to grow it so that I can give instruction in the islands, the South Pacific Islands, because they burn to grow yam.
Yeah.
So how can you grow yam without burning? Because burning is wasting their resource. They're getting less and less fertility. Always had bees here, but we've only just recently, in the last couple of years, got into the honeybee hives, and we got the Kenyan top bar hives. So I hopefully can split again this year. We split last year, and hopefully split another one and get more happening. So we've got our own honey, not a lot yet, but you don't get a real high abundance from the Kenyan top bars, but it's adequate for what we want. So. So my food forest isn't super productive. Yeah. I haven't really focused on the productivity. I spend most of my energy on the system, and expecting in time that the productivity will come in. You go to other people's places, and within 2 or 3 years, they've got abundant fruits coming off their fruit trees, and that hasn't been my focus. So mine's just been setting the system, because when I'm 80 years old, I don't want to be tending each plant. I want the plants to look after themselves. And that's the thing of the food forest. That's the concept, that it's an ecosystem, and then you come in and do some serious management, it'll get very productive. So. And it's quite interesting. See, there's a bunya nut that's coming, so that'll have to be potted up. Yeah. So probably some of the waste from when we harvested bunya nuts and processed, there's a half seed in there that wasn't very big and just got thrown in here, and it's just germinated. So that's starting to cycle. We find our hoop pines coming up in here, and interestingly, we don't get very many rainforest trees in here. It's got enough ecology that nature doesn't need to put that in here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so you get more coming up in the garden than you do in here, because those niches are filled up. Because by the function and the design. So yeah. But that we get the bunya nut, which I don't mind, because that's a fruit one. I did say the hoop pine's occasional one, but we just transplant them out somewhere else. Yeah.
Check out the size of this grapefruit. Yeah, I've got pretty big hands, and that's covering the whole thing.
And it's interesting how things are starting to express. That I had no idea that that'll be a custard apple there. How big it's got. The custard apples aren't producing yet, so I'm sort of waiting for that to come in, that productivity. This is a wampy here. I've only ever eaten wampies once. I've never harvested wampies. So it's a cluster of fruits that look a little bit like locusts, but they're not. And very yummy. That's the locust there. We get a little bit of locust, not much. It's not the right climate for locusts, but we're going to grow more of them because the goats love it. So coming back to that, we've sort of gone into the tropic sort of a feel sort of thing, and what's actually probably made a big difference is that hedge I put there. That's a lesser galangal. We don't actually eat that hedge, eat the root of that, but that was put in basically to stop the bush turkeys from wandering in, because when bush turkeys wander in, they find the food, then they fly in. So you try and put a barrier up to stop them wandering in initially, because they're lazy, they just wander around. They don't fly around looking for food, they walk around looking for food. Yeah. And so put that hedge in, and that's actually, I don't have hardly any grass growing between the bananas and it. Right. So it's created a covering, it's got shaded it out, but it's also created a wind barrier and stops that dehydrating winds, and so it's created that ecology. We've got the vetiver grass above, and there's a swale up there, it's just evolved into a space, and rather than a dehydrated orchard. You can just imagine that you wouldn't have that; it'd just be trees and grass. This is brome grass. Yeah. Now, 4 or 5 years ago, never had this grass. Yeah. So it's come in on its own. I'm trying to get it to grow in the pastures actually, because in the winter, it grows in the winter only, and in the winter the fields don't grow. So if I can get that in there and get that annual diversity coming in. And you can see this is the path that's growing well, but under the trees where all the litter is, it's not growing. But you go a bit further up there and a native grass has come in. And that's done it all by itself, you know. So you just create a space and nature does its thing. That's it there. That's up in the forest, on the forest floor. That's a native grass.
Yes, I know that one.
And I like that one. It's really nice and soft.
Yeah.
And that can work its way into here, and I'm happy with that. So that's your feedback on what, create the space, allow things to evolve and do their thing, express, more than evolve, I should say. And and then this other stuff's coming in. So yeah, just have to come in one serious week or a couple of serious weeks in the main chop and drop, and do a bit of management in that as well, which is a bit tricky. No, and then pruning and shaping. So that's sort of the end of the food forest, and then this was the ginger section, but I ran out of adequate water for the ginger. So it's been in sort of just sitting there. Now we're going to turn this into syntropic. Okay. I was actually moving towards syntropic without knowing I was, because of what I was starting to do here.